We spend our whole lives working for money, saving it, thinking about it. But what is it really? We're going to dig into that today and figure out why the cash in your pocket just doesn't seem to go as far as it used to.
I mean, you felt it, right? Whether you're buying a pint of milk, filling up the car, or just dreaming about buying a house, everything seems to cost more every time you look. So is everything in the world suddenly getting more valuable? Or is something happening to the money itself?
Okay, take a look at this. This chart is, well, it's pretty shocking. It shows just how much the pound's buying power has collapsed. Let's put it this way. If one of your ancestors stashed away 100 pounds back in the 1800s, and that was a fortune back then, and you found it today, it would buy you less than a single quid could have bought them. The value has just evaporated. Over 99% of it, gone.
So, where did it all go? I mean, that's not just a small dip, that's a complete wipeout. Let's get to the bottom of this. And that brings us to the core question, really. Think about house prices. When we see them go through the roof, is it because houses are just getting ridiculously valuable? Or could it be that the very thing we're using to measure their price, the pound, is actually shrinking? Like trying to measure a room with a ruler that gets shorter every year? And wow, this chart just says it all. That solid line, that's the story everyone knows, right? House prices, measured in pounds, just rocketing up. But now look at that dashed line. That's the price of the exact same houses, but measured in ounces of gold. And what happens? The price is almost flat. For 50 years, the house didn't really change its value. The yardstick we were using did. Just think about that for a second. A house in the UK cost pretty much the same amount of gold in 2020 as it did way back in 1970. So if you'd saved in gold instead of cash, you'd be in a totally different position. It really points the finger, doesn't it? The problem isn't the house, it's the pound.
Okay, so this leads us to the main culprit, the word we hear all the time, inflation. But I'm willing to bet the real story of what inflation is not what most of us think.
Right, so we all hear inflation, and we think, oh, that just means prices are going up. But look at the actual definition here. It's a rise in the general level of prices related to an increase in the volume of money. See that last part? That's the bit that gets left out of the conversation. It's not just that prices go up. They go up because there's more money floating around, making each individual pound less scarce and, well, less valuable. And if you want proof, well, here it is. This is the smoking gun. This chart shows the total supply of money, pounds, in the UK economy. And just look at it, especially after the 1970s. It's not a gentle slope. It's a vertical launch, an absolute explosion of new money. That's not a coincidence. That is the direct cause of the buying power chart we saw at the start. It's simple, really. More money chasing the same amount of stuff means every pound buys you a little bit less. But here's the really wild part. This isn't some accident or a system that's out of control. Governments and central banks, they want this. They actually aim for a little bit of inflation every year, usually around 2%. Why on earth would they do that? Well, a few reasons. They're terrified of the opposite, falling prices or deflation, which can grind an economy to a halt. It also gives you an incentive, a push, to spend or invest your money, not just hoard it while it loses value. And maybe most importantly for them, it helps pay off their own massive debts. The debt stays the same number, but the pounds used to pay it back become worth less over time. So how did we even get here? How did we create a system where the money supply can just explode like that? To get that answer, we need to wind the clock back all the way to a single moment in 1971 that changed everything. You see, for pretty much all of human history, money was, well, it was something real, something scarce, like gold or silver. You couldn't just print more gold. Even when paper notes came along, they were basically just IOUs, a promise that you could trade that piece of paper for a certain amount of gold in a vault somewhere. This was called the gold standard, and it put a hard limit on how much money could be created. But then, on August 15, 1971, U.S. President Nixon went on TV and severed the final link between the U.S. dollar and gold. And the key word he used was temporary. He said it was a temporary suspension. Well, here we are over 50 years later, and that temporary measure is still going strong. Funny how that works, huh? And that decision had a massive consequence. Since that day, for really the first time in history, there's been nothing holding back money creation. No physical anchor, no scarcity. The pound, the dollar, the euro, they have value only because the government says they do. That's what's called fiat money. It's backed by nothing but faith and a government decree.
So if money isn't backed by gold and can just be created, who's actually doing the creating? Where does it come from? The answer might really surprise you.
Okay, let's play a little game. Who creates most of the new money in our economy? Is it A, the Royal Mint, making coins, B, the Bank of England, or C, the high street banks you and I use every day? You might think it's A or B, but the incredible answer is C. The vast majority of new money is created by commercial banks.
So how do they do it? Well, it happens literally every time someone gets a loan. When you go get a mortgage for a house, the bank doesn't go to its vault and get you someone else's savings. No, they just type the numbers into your bank account and poof, that new money exists. A second before you sign the loan agreement, it simply wasn't there.
I know. That sounds way too simple, almost unbelievable. And you're not alone in thinking that. The famous economist J.K. Galbraith even said, the process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. It just feels like it should be more complicated than that. But it isn't. That's how it works.
Okay, so let's connect the dots. This brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. If new money is just loaned into existence, what does that actually mean for the way our entire economy is structured? Well, it means something pretty profound. It means our entire money system is built on a foundation of debt. If almost all money is created when someone takes out a loan, then for the amount of money in the economy to grow, we all have to take on more debt. Individuals, businesses, the government, everyone. And if you look at the numbers, that's exactly what we see. Back in the 70s, household debt was pretty stable, around 30% of GDP. But from the 80s onwards, right after the system changed, it just exploded. The system now needs us to constantly borrow more money just to keep the whole thing going. So let's just recap. We're living in a world where our money isn't backed by anything scarce. It's created out of thin air when banks issue debt. And it's basically designed by the government to lose a little bit of its value every single year. Which really leaves all of us with a huge question, doesn't it? In a world of infinite money, what on earth are you supposed to do to protect the value of your own?